The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everybody. We're going to give it about a minute for the rest of our audience today to sign in, so we will get started pretty soon. All right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. So welcome to today's webinar, Cross-Organizational Sharing for Market Growth. This is the latest edition in our 2018 series of Best Practices for Market Development. Let me share a few logistics before we jump into our content today. We do have 2 webinars scheduled upcoming in September and October. We do encourage you to register for those, and I will circulate the link to the registration pages as soon as those are available. Today's presentation is being recorded. We will again send out the recording about a week, usually after the webinar is completed, and Helen will post it to LinkedIn as well. While you're on LinkedIn, we do encourage you to join some of our special interest groups that are tailored towards your specific industries. The links are there below for you. And we will host questions at the end of the presentation. You can type your questions into the question window in your GoToWebinar screen, and I will be monitoring those and bringing them to Helen's attention at the end of the webinar. So let's go ahead and get started. My name again is Kathleen Ojo. I lead the commercial sector marketing programs here at Esri, and I will be your moderator today. Leading our webinar once again is Helen Thompson, our Global Marketing Strategy Manager here at Esri. Helen has built her career on helping businesses across many industries grow by implementing a location strategy. We're happy to be here with you today. So Helen is constantly reminding me that data is important, but not as important as the answers it provides or the stories that it tells. So if you know Helen, you know she's a teacher and a mentor who freely shares her knowledge with others. When you see Helen working with data and spatial analysis, you can see why she believes in sharing it. Data tells stories, and sharing those stories leads to insights and more comprehensive answers that we and others can continue to build upon. Sharing data, models, and workflows improves the whole organization's agility and capability. When data is shared, knowledge becomes a communal asset. You may have detected that sharing is the central theme of this webinar. We're going to show you how to use spatial analysis and location intelligence to unlock the insights in your spreadsheets, discover answers, and share the stories that you've discovered in your data. First, let's recap something we shared in the last webinar, the challenges every organization faces in getting data ready for analysis. Whatever form of analysis you're doing, data wrangling probably encompasses about 80% of the process, would you say? Finding, working with, and understanding the data is critical to moving beyond the so what to provide clear, actionable insights that inform decision makers and move growth-focused businesses forward. Despite all the improvements in technology and data connectivity, there remains a gap between the questions and satisfying answers to them. Bridging that chasm is vital. Exploratory analysis can help with this because you can quickly discover and explore your data to get better clarity or a new perspective on the problem. To do that, you need data from many different sources, and it needs to be in a usable format. You don't want to spend time reformatting and cleaning data. You need data that's appropriately structured and shared to help you understand the question and find the best answer. You can enrich your understanding by connecting different data sets together. This adds a new contextual insight from which you distill the key facts, stories, and patterns that once lay hidden in the data. Now you can share those stories, and each time you do this, you improve your understanding and your organization. It's a virtuous cycle that allows you to keep building on what you know and continue to shrink the gap between questions and answers. And I believe now we're going to jump into our first poll. We're going to be running a few of these throughout the webinar, sprinkled here and there, just to gain more information about who you are, our audience, and then the issues that are important to you and what you want to learn about. So here we'd like to know, what industry are you from? Thank you for everyone who's responding. It's really interesting. We get quite a variety of people from different organizations, different industries that are all tackling kind of the same problem with dealing with your data, formatting it, making the most of it, getting the best information out of it. It's definitely not an industry-specific problem. So we'll let this go on for just a couple more seconds here. We do appreciate your response. Okay, I'm going to close that one out. Let's take a look at our results. Real estate, always heavily represented, but then quite a few other as well. So we're getting audience from a lot of industries who are all looking for answers on how to tackle some of these issues with your data and how to best visualize and understand the results. So with that, I would like to now hand it over to Helen.
Thanks, Kathleen, and welcome everybody, whether you're joining us live or in the recording. And I would encourage you to use the chat window for questions that you have or comments about this. And then look at the recordings afterwards, because I'm going to share quite a lot pretty quickly to show the power of what our software allows you to do and what really the ArcGIS system and the solution suite that it really is allows you to do. So let's think about the process of analysis. As Kathleen said, it all begins with a well-framed question. We're going to manipulate, quantify, and manage data to help with this process. It's a process in which we're going to explore and discover insights. We're going to model and compute those relationships. And we're going to interpret the results that are coming out. The entire ArcGIS platform and all of the software solutions that I'll use today have been designed to allow you to integrate the different workflows of getting answers and making decisions in a way that really is focused on that fifth step, the most vital step, which is sharing results, sharing the knowledge that you've created and empowering other people to use that knowledge that you've created. And I want to differentiate between data and knowledge, because people are part of this system, people are part of this process. You know, increasingly machines are collecting data. We've got machine learning and AI and all these other things which are generating data lakes, data oceans, you know, big data collections. And what we really need is we need humans involved in this process. It's the analyst which really brings this data together and makes all these big data collections and all these data sets more useful and valuable across the entire organization. And Esri is set out fundamentally to try to address those problems. Tools like Insights for ArcGIS are used in the second part of this webinar. It's specifically designed to bring spatial questions to the fore. Business Analyst has been one of our key business products for more than 20 years, answering these type of questions and sharing our demographics data all the way across the ArcGIS solution set has been fundamentally important. ArcGIS Maps for Office is one of my favorite capabilities. It's really undervalued and underused, but it's my go-to software for when I'm trying to take spreadsheets and making them available. And I'm going to start this webinar that in that environment. And of course, sharing data with ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Pro, all of these things come together to really create an operational, cross-organizational view of how we can use data. And the need to share answers is fundamentally important, because when we think about an organization, we've got different hierarchies, this pyramid of organizational roles and personas. We've got GIS analysts who understand a lot about data and spatial processes and spatial analysis. We live as GIS people in the world of location, but a decision maker doesn't. And often an industry analyst, an industry expert in your organization doesn't either. So the geospatial understanding gets less and less as we move across the organization in many cases, and certainly up through the organization. The decision makers are less and less aware of the role and the value of spatial analysis and spatial data. And this is why it's vital that everyone that is a spatial expert, that are using the sort of capabilities that ArcGIS offers, that we take the responsibility to prepare data in a way that all of these different groups can use. We bring the power of spatial insight and spatial analysis to our organizations, and we start to connect those organizations. We connect people within the organizations, and we bust silos by doing so. And we can also connect different success partners within the organization and outside. Because many of those success partners actually have data that we might want to use and connect to further. So as Kathleen said, this whole thing about data connection, discovery, analysis, modeling, use, and then sharing becomes a very virtuous cycle. And so to kick off and sort of frame what I'm going to do for the next 30 minutes or so, we wanted to just get a sense of how you, as spatial professionals, business leaders, industry experts, anybody in that matrix that I just described, use both business intelligence and classic spatially focused analysis. So over to you, Kathleen.
All right, thank you, everybody. There's a poll up on your screen right now. I will let that run for just a second. Okay, let's close that out and share back the results. What are your biggest challenges when communicating with executives in your own department? And it looks like a pretty even spread, but definitely getting them to understand the value and importance of your work kind of nudges to the front. Totally understandable. A lot of the times the work we do in the background, especially if it's very data-centric, kind of goes unnoticed. It's a little bit hard to articulate the value and importance. All right, and then we have a double whammy for you right now. We're going to ask another question as part of this poll. Related question. What are your biggest challenges when communicating with executives in other departments? again, thank you very much for participating. All right, we'll give that a few more seconds there. Okay, let me close that out and share that back. And again, and this time by an even higher margin, them understanding the value and importance of your work. And I do understand how that would be more challenging when you're branching outside of your department to speak to other executives. But then getting time and face-to-face meetings is always difficult to come by too. So very interesting information. We'll hand it back over to Helen.
All right, thank you, everybody. And this really confirms what I have seen throughout my career at Esri and before I came here, is really a fundamental challenge in trying to communicate with maps and data to people. And so what I wanted to do was just start off with some basics to really show you how we can take simple capabilities and tools like Excel and build them into beautiful, powerful maps which communicate with a wide audience. So I'm going to start off here in ArcGIS Maps for Office. This is something that many of us have and use every single day. And classically, we see these types of tables where there's some type of geographic reference, and then there's attribute information about them. I've logged into ArcGIS Online and made the connection between that, and using ArcGIS Maps for Office, I can very simply just click on my table that's in here. It automatically recognizes the geography of this and allows me to bring data together and represent it in many, many different ways. So my simple home ownership by state, with 2 clicks on that table, I now have a beautiful map which anybody in my organization can understand. And I can, of course, change all the symbologies and manage all the data and start using this capability to put this table and the map into some context for other people. But what about people that don't use GIS sort of day to day? How do we help them? How do we take other sort of forms of data and information, something like this, right? A classic sales region map. We've got all the same states, but this time we don't have attributes about the states, we have regions. So those regions are set up in such a way that I'm basically going to aggregate up from the states. So we can use the same type of logic to bring that information together and create a simple territory map. So this will now aggregate them all up. We've got the 51 states and territories inside. I can color code them. But one of the things that I really like to do is to actually change the style, right? So using more styles, I can now go in and let's click on regions, and it's automatically identified the 5 regions that we've got in our data table. So this could sit in my world and I could be happy with this data that I'm interested in. But what I really want to do is to share this with other people. We'll call this USA Regional Sales. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share this data layer with ArcGIS Online. I'm going to give it some tags which are really important to be able to find information. When you share your data, think about how it becomes something that other people can search for. On ArcGIS Online, that's the critical mechanism, these tags, the way that we identify data. We use tags in every single one of our products that connect to ArcGIS Online. So using good tags is really essential for what we want to do. And I'm going to say that this is, for me, a template, and it's about sales, and it's also, I'm going to call it custom geographies, because I'm going to come back and use this later to make a new locator file. So that's going up to ArcGIS Online, and it's going to be now created as a feature layer in ArcGIS Online. So let's zoom in here, and it'll be content that's coming into my area. So I'm going to refresh this, and we'll see that it starts to come into our area, and it's stored in ArcGIS Online. And if I jump back to the map, you can see that we get a notice here in Excel that it's been shared. So let's jump again back to ArcGIS Online, click the dots. Let's open this in the map viewer. And what we have now is a map with all of our regions, with the colors that we had in ArcGIS Maps for Office, shared with ArcGIS Online. And of course, one of the great things I can do is to share that more broadly with the organization. And to do so, what I need to do is to save this as a map here in ArcGIS Online. But what I'm going to do before that is I'm going to do a little bit of analysis, because what I really want to do is to get rid of all of those state boundaries. And to do that, I'm simply going to choose the analysis button, manage data, and I'm going to now use an attribute field, which came from my Excel file, to make all of these areas disappear, the individual state boundaries. And I'm going to use that now as part of a sales territory map. If I could spell, it would be good. Right. That's probably still wrong, but we've got a spell checker. And spell checkers are absolutely vital. It's amazing how many times I come across data that people have misspelled things. So you're first putting the data in, you do exactly what I've just done, you misspell something. And it's really common in Excel files. I was working with a colleague recently who used this type of locator file that I'm going to show and told me that it didn't work, and gleefully told me that it didn't work and it missed some data. And then they found out that misspelled Connecticut and Massachusetts, some of the most frequently misspelled states in the US. And the whole point about this was that they didn't even spell check their data. There are amazing tools in Excel to do this. So I really, really encourage you to go and do that. Look at the data validation tools so that you can set the values for how data might be used and how you can manage it within simple spreadsheets and within text eliminated files to make that data more useful for other people in the organization. And before I finish today, I'm going to give you 10 tips for managing that data and the importance of Excel. But absolutely, correctly spelling your data is vital. So now, here are our territories. And if I look at symbolization, what I can do is now all of the regions have been aggregated up, and there are no longer any state boundaries. So this is a pretty cool way to start to share data that other people might use. Because it's a service, any user that can connect to ArcGIS Online can make use of it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to quit out of this data set, and I'm going to go in another one, which is a simple table that somebody added of sales by region. Very common data set, common environment. I'm going to click on the table. We've sold so many widgets. And we're going to make ArcGIS Online connect to that ArcGIS Maps for Office connect to that data set. And you'll see that it doesn't really know about anything about our regions. These are not standard references, but we've got lots of locator files that we've built all over the world, organized by country. You can see the 11 or so that we have for the US, but I'm going to build my own using that map reference. So I click on here, and I'm going to type in sales regions, which is the map that I just created, the layout within them. And so we can see all of the other people that have shared things in similar ways, and I can go through and look at all of these. By giving it a good name, I can come back and find so here's my sales territories that I just shared with ArcGIS Online. And now I'm going to give this locator a good name as well. So you can be lazy, you can just sort of hit the defaults, but the more that you share and build things using good naming conventions, the better it is for everybody that comes to use that later. And I'm now going to say that the join field is my region. Add a locator type, is my sales territories. I'm going to join to region, click OK, color code them here, and I'm off adding that data, and I can just click select. And what it will do now is go through the data and build a map of all of my different sales, where now that each one of these is linked through ArcGIS Maps for Office using that new locator type. So let's open another data set. Let's go back to something that we used before, our home ownership data. I shared recently a cartogram with people, and in exactly the same way, I've created a cartogram which uses these state references. And now what I want to do is I want to connect up my state boundaries to this cartogram. I'm going to do exactly the same thing. Click on More, go to my own locations, and this time I'm going to type in USA cartogram. And this is completely public service that any of you can use. So it's shared. I'm going to say select my hexagonal one. I'm going to say that it's linked to state name. So those of you that have trouble spelling Connecticut and Massachusetts, I've also included the state abbreviations for you. And we're going to say that this one is our hex cartogram. And a shout out to the great John Nelson and Ken Field, who've prototyped and sort of plowed the furrows for this type of representation of data. My cartogram fits on the US, and so I'm able to build these different cartograms using this data. So I can look at the different options associated with all of this, and it's probably in another map somewhere, hidden away. Should have quit this one. And you know, those cartograms I can use and share with ArcGIS Online. So in the same way that I shared something previously, I'm just going to quit out of this. I can take all of this information, share it back up, and make the cartograms part of my common reference. So here's one of the grid templates that's available to you. Done the same thing with other representations. So the grid, not just the hexagon. So all of these are available for you to use and get access to. So now let me go back to PowerPoint and start showing some more of this. The data that I used as part of this in the hexagon example, because I to share all that information, I can bring it together in things like Business Analyst. So that ownership data in the different hexagons, I can bring in, use as a reference in ArcGIS Online, bring that into Business Analyst Web, and then link together these charts and tables. The same process allows us to connect to all of these different environments. And if you want to do this for yourself, these cartograms, the individual feature services, including the white mask, which is used in the background, are available to you. And if you want to play around with some of the maps themselves, search on these different terms. So the way that I typically use spreadsheets is as a map source. We saw that in the first case, generate a map of home ownership by state. I made custom geographies for them. I can use them as map templates, things like my sales regional information. And I can connect between different data sets and different files, as I'm going to do with insights for ArcGIS. And of course, as locator files, common references that overcome those spelling errors and those challenges. So we're going to break out for another poll before I switch gears and start to use insights for ArcGIS.
All right, thank you, Helen. Next poll's popping up on your screen right now. We'd like to know what's the ratio of executive use of insight from spatial analysis versus business analysis. So about what percentage of insights gleaned from spatial analysis are your executives using versus the percentage of insights from business intelligence? We'll give that about 10, 15 more seconds for you to get your responses in. All right, let me share out the results of this poll now. And it looks like it definitely leans more towards insights gleaned from business intelligence, and maybe the analysis from spatial, or the insight from spatial analysis isn't quite as prevalent in your reporting and your relationships with your executives so far. So handing it back to you, Helen.
Thanks, Kathleen. And once again, that's the ultimate challenge, you know, taking this information that we all produce and sharing it with people. And those of you who follow me on Twitter would have seen a tweet this morning about anagrams, right? Anagrams are something that I'm really keen on because what they're representations of is jumbling of letters, right? If I look at this anagram thrusting his cigars, it's another anagram for insights for ArcGIS. And although all 6 of these are words, only one collection of words really makes sense. And that's one of the things that we often see in data. Because people don't check the values, because they don't check the data before they share it with other people, the value that other people get out of that data is reduced. And that's a big problem. And I want to share with you a little story about ants and sheepdogs. When I was very young, I spent an afternoon, like many of us do when very young, looking at ants. And I was fascinated by the ants which weren't part of the pack. And I had a popsicle, an iced lolly, and it melted. And this one single ant came and found it, tasted it, and went back. And a couple of minutes later, there was a second ant. And 20 minutes later, there was a train of ants coming to that spilt popsicle. And I was really excited by this and sunburned. And I went home and I said to my mum, I said, ants are amazing. They're like this machine, and there's a little robot that goes out and discovers things and goes back and tells the others, and then they all come because ants can talk to each other. And my mum, who was proper British, said, That's lovely, dear. Eat your tea. And I was upset by that, but I wanted to tell my dad because he was more involved in these types of things and he loved science. So I waited up all night and I came home. My dad was proper Australian and he said, "Why are you awake?" I said, "It's because ants, they're amazing." I said, "You know, they're like machines, they're like robots, and they talk to each other and they communicate." And my dad said, "Oh, mate, that's great. Did you like your tea?" And that really frustrated me as a child because they didn't see the value of something that I discovered, or I felt that they hadn't shared the excitement of my discovery. And maybe it's because I didn't share it properly and correctly. And a few months later, we moved to southern England and I got to watch sheepdogs. And one of the things that I realized is that sheepdogs organize herds. The sheep in this photograph are in that position and feeding, not because they discovered it like that lonesome ant, but because they were directed by a sheepdog. And what I want us all to be is much more like the sheepdogs, directing our executives, directing other people that we work with to find that information that adds value. And as an example, I'm going to use ArcGIS and the insights for ArcGIS product. And here's a dashboard that I made earlier. It's connection of store information, where I've connected stores to customers and customers to visits and things like how people paid. And each one of these cards are interactive. I can click on one and see the response to the customers or stores or all of these different behaviors. They're completely interactive. So I'm going to build this dashboard live once again as part of this webinar series to show you the power of connecting data and the power of taking relatively simple data sets, Excel files and other things, and bringing together brand new insights that we can discover. So let's start with a new workbook. New workbook is my area in which I can build these different models. I've got data that I shared in ArcGIS Online, and I talked earlier about the importance of setting up tags. So I've got San Francisco Bay Area customers by channel, and I can quickly add that, and it automatically makes a map from it because it's shared with ArcGIS Online. And it actually lives and exists in ArcGIS Online. But I can add other data. So one of the things that I might want to do is to add data from an Excel file. So I'm going to drag onto this area a set of stores. This comes from a simple CSV. It's loaded as a table. I'm going to change the name of this, and I'm going to call it stores. And if I expand it out, you'll see that it's got things like an ID. I can change the type for this to be a string. And a little later, I'll show that the store is the common relationship between the store that customers visited and the customers. But you'll see that this has a location, the little map pin, which is telling you that we can build a map. So this map that I built over here, but there's not a pin for my store. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to enable location, just like we saw in Office. It's going to look through that data set. It's now discovered there's address. It understands that it's US. I can run this, and now my stores data set becomes intelligent, and I can drag it onto the map and make it into a map automatically now because it's been enabled. And I can do things like change the size of these. Let's change the symbology a little bit, make these a little bit bigger because I'm going to use these in the future. But what I want to also do is connect my stores to my customers using this relationship, the store ID. So I'm going to click relationship. I'm going to add my customers. and my stores to this relationship panel, it's discovered that there are common matches, things like the city. That's the smallest level of geography, which is common between these two different data sets. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the store ID instead. So my customers visit a store, and my stores have a number or a name. I've made that relationship, and now I've got a derived data set associated with that. And I can drag now my customers onto the map, and I'm going to use stores to make that connection and to build that map. So now each one of my customers is color-coded by the store, and I could use any of these different attributes to make this work. What I'm going to do is I'm going to synchronize the extents. So as I scroll and zoom in around this data, that both maps match. And I'm also going to set up what's called cross filters. And what that will do is exploit that relationship that I just built. So using stores, now I can click on one of the stores and see all of the customers which are linked to that store. So without knowing how these are connected and customers and stores are related, I can start to see patterns. I can build density maps. I can do all this analysis. I can link origin and destination using straight lines. But because this is a BI type environment, what I want to do is I want to exploit more and more information about these. So maybe what I want to know is, how did they engage with our marketing? I could put a map up of this, but really what I want to do is I want to change this into a chart. So let's look at a tree map now. What it's going to do, it's going to aggregate all of that data up to look at what different types of information we used, or how all these different users interacted with us. All right. And this is all the interactions of every single customer. But I'm going to do this in a different way. So rather than having everything associated with this, I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to take all of my stores and all of my source code, and I'm going to drag that onto the map, and I'm going to make this into a tree map. So now I can start to see all of the ways that these interact. And that allows me to start to see for each store all the different channels that different people used. And I can do this in many, many different ways and start to bring all these data sets together. And being able to do this allows us to do things like say, well, where do people visit, say, on a quarterly basis? I can take this information and I can link it to my stores. So I can see the visits across all of my stores, or click on a store and automatically see my tree map and my quarterly sales change. But because of that relationship, I can also do things like click on quarter 4 and see who visited what store at what time, where they come from, and what channel they use to interact with us. I can build other relationships with this data. So I can use, for example, the store and the source code and start to think about the different relationships that get created as part of this in things like a link chart. And what a link chart does is it now says, for every one of our locations, tell me how it's related to others. So in this case, our store in green, and the type of campaign that we use to drive customers to that location. And I'm going to cross-link this in the same way. So now what I can start to do is to see all of these relationships. So in quarter 2, these are all of my most successful marketing campaign activities. These are all of the stores that benefited from those customers in Q4 going because of the outreach. And you'll see that store 16 is an outlier. I can click on any location and see what these patterns might be, and everything changes as a consequence. So I can see the success of coupon marketing versus email versus driving people to our website. All of those behaviors I can come and look at. And I can connect data in many different ways. So, for example, one of the things I have the tapestry information, so the dominant tapestry, and I can drag that and make this into a histogram, so I can see all of the tapestry classes that have got set up associated with this, and there are 65 of them. And one of the challenges associated with this is I'm just using a number. I don't know the names of these tapestry groups. So in the same way that we did this before, I can take a spreadsheet of tapestry information and drag and drop it onto my map. I can add that information, and now I can establish a relationship between my tapestry segments with a name and a number and all of these amazing 70+ attributes with the tapestry number which is associated with those customers. So to do this, I establish a relationship, so my customers by channel, my tapestry segments, and I can come in here and say that this is now my relationship, my dominant tapestry group, and that is linked to a name. Click finish, and now we have that relationship established. So now if I look at some of this information, what I've now also joined associated with this are things like the household type. So I can drag and drop that, create a chart. Something went wrong in this. I can drag any of this sort of information onto the screen. So for example, the number of people, the store location that they go to, build all of this information whichever way I want to do so. It's not working at the moment, I apologize for that. And really make these things work for me. And most importantly with all of this, what I can do is I can save all this information and I can share it out with people. So this entire model that I've created, or this entire workflow that I've created, if I give it a name, like San Francisco customers, it's possible to share all of this information with people. So I'm going to share the page. Here's my model. I'm going to add a description, of course, go back and add tags to this, add a good description. I'm just going to use a short one for now. I can share it across my group, within my organization, whatever it might be. And anybody that now is in my organization, or if I want to share this publicly, gets access to the work that I've done. And if I click on go, you can now see that page being shared with everybody in just now a viewer format with all the interactions that we set up available to people. So I'm going to jump back to PowerPoint and kind of close this section off and then open it up for one more poll and some questions. So all the data that I just showed, the tapestry segment information is available for you to download, not as a PDF, but as an Excel file that you can go and investigate and explore all of these different characteristics. You can bring it into things like insights. You can use it in many, many different ways. It's kind of like enriching the data with ArcGIS Online. To improve the data in spreadsheets, one of the things I really recommend is to just focus on consistencies. Choose good names, write dates in a consistent format. Always save your data as plain text, right, without empty cells. I had a colleague in the health department who spent almost 2 days reformatting 30,000 records because they were just so poorly organized that they were almost unusable. And she's seeing amazing patterns now after reorganizing that data. But it would be much better if the person that created that data did this work before them. You know, put just one thing in a cell, make it rectangular. What I mean by that is it's rows and columns, right? One row for one set of information, one column for each attribute that you want to use. And don't please use things like calculations. And when you share this, you make that data available, everybody can get access to it. So my tips for improving data sharing across the organization are really about the fact that data and analytics should be foundational bedrocks of your entire strategy. It starts with data, it's not about technology. And really, the more you can do to educate your organization on the value of data is about you sharing your work, taking these data sets which live in your individual domain and spreadsheets and sharing them through Portal and ArcGIS Online and other capabilities. Before investing in technology, invest in data interoperability and governance. Think about the names you use. If you're using states and people can't spell the state name, give them the state abbreviation as well. Make it consistent. If you're expecting somebody to type in a state name in a spreadsheet, use the data validation and verification tools to make sure that they only can pick one thing from the list. It's pretty obvious, but those small things can bust silos. And the better you make your data, the better it can be leveraged in new technologies like machine learning and all the things that are going on in the world of AI and automation. So in summary, you know, your data has a story to tell. I really encourage you to share it. And to help with sharing, I want to share some examples. The data in spreadsheets, top 10 tips, came from a really good paper that I encourage you all to read. It's a short read, but there's some beautiful examples of the worst practice that probably all of us make. The tapestry summary is available as an Excel spreadsheet for you to download. It's organized by segments and life modes and a combination of segments and life modes. And you can learn all about those individual segments and life modes. If you search in ArcGIS Online or in ArcGIS Maps for Office, the USA cartograms, you can use those as cartograms, and you can use those as locator files in ArcGIS Maps for Office. If you want to try using the data that I had today, I've made that available, the stores and the tapestry information and all of the customers, which is an anonymized data set. It's all made up. Don't think there's anything in there that's going to, you know, be applicable from a business context. But I've made that available so you can play with insights. And I really encourage you to go and trial insights and start adding and using some of this data. So we're going to hand it over for the final poll, and then we're going to take some Q&A.
Excellent. All right. Last poll coming at you right now, and this is a quick one. We'd just like to know if you'd like us to reach out and contact you to learn more about the various workflows that you've seen today. Go ahead and let us know. We'd be happy to have our team reach out to you. We can answer any questions you have. And as we shared in one of the original slides, we do have LinkedIn groups as well that you can connect with us. Make sure you connect with Helen and I too. You know, we're happy to help you and share what we know and help you in your workflows. So let's give this just a minute. Second. All right, thank you, everybody. Share that out. So that's good. It looks like about half of you are ready to learn a little bit more, go a little bit deeper into this. So fantastic. All right.
All right, I must have done a good job. And I apologize for a couple of the challenges during it in my haste. So.
Not a problem. All right, are we ready to take a few questions?
Absolutely.
Okay, we've had a couple come in. How can customers see the data I share? Do they need an account to access?
It really depends on what you're talking about in terms of sharing. So sharing with ArcGIS Online, you can make all of your data completely public and use sort of applications, infographics, and other things to go and share. So you can make it completely public. If there's other data that you want to keep private and workbooks you want to keep private to your organization, then they will need a login. We support both viewers, which they can only just view the data, and also viewing and access in which people can manipulate the data a little more. So it really depends on the use case that you want to do with the data. But in most cases, all of the data you want to share with people, you can choose the rules at which you set it up to be completely public or to be shared amongst a small group of people, what we call group sharing, or shared across the organization through organizational sharing, or just held private by you. So.
All right, thank you, Helen. Here's another one. Can I use insights within Business Analyst? For example, if I were to export a report, could I import that report directly into Insights?
So there's not a way at the moment of directly connecting those two together. What we are looking at are ways of making the data sets that you generate between the two different products much more interoperable with each other. But really, in some ways, some of the tools are not, they're complementary. So the Insights is much more about sort of exploration and discovery in this sort of visual paradigm. And Business Analyst is about sort of the analytics in a much more sort of tabular environment. But increasingly, things like the infographics themselves are this common key between those two different products.
All right. We've had a couple questions come in regarding templates and templatizing things. So is there a template for using and analyzing CRM?
So this is actually one of the things that I'm going to spend the rest of this year on and the next half year on, is to really start to create more and more recipe cards for people. I see a lot of people ask the question, if I do X, what can I do as a consequence? You know, what does Y come out of, to build these sort of workflows? And so what we're going to be doing is taking a lot of these lessons and these examples and building them as recipe cards with the idea that if you follow these 5 steps, here are the 8, 10, 12, 2 dozen things that you can do. So watch out for those. They're going to start coming out in October, and we're going to have a website dedicated to them. They're not really meant as training tools. They're not replacing what people do with training at Esri, but these are recipe cards in which you get the data and examples, and very much focused on the types of workflows I've been showing in this webinar series.
We're looking forward to those, Helen. Thank you. I think we have time for one more quick question. So what's the difference between the online and portal versions of Insights for ArcGIS?
Oh, that's a good question. Take a little time to answer, but I'll just do a abbreviated version. They're very, very similar. The portal version, the enterprise version, is a little ahead. It's our primary development environment, and contains some more advanced and different versions of the online version. but about 80% of the capability in Portal is available in online. And the real difference between the two, between the enterprise and the online version, is that you can simply log in from a browser to use online. You know, we had so many people who using the enterprise version that really wanted to go further and get this into online, that we moved in that direction. There's a great page that describes the capabilities. So if you want to use the reference go.esri.com/insights, you can find and compare the different functionality between the two, and you can sign up for a trial there.
Wonderful. All right, I think that's about all the time we had today. But again, you can reach out to us on LinkedIn or via email if there's any questions you have that we didn't answer. Just again, a reminder on the upcoming webinars in our series. We will circulate a link immediately after this webinar where you can go check out previous sessions and then register for future webinars. You will also receive the recording via email shortly, as soon as we can get it up, and we do encourage you to go find us on LinkedIn. And with that, I think we'll close it down for today. Thank you so much, Helen.
No worries. And if you want to connect with either of us, here are the contact details, and we look forward to your questions and comments about this. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.